Voiceover is everywhere, and you hear it every day. From radio to TV.
What's the story, Wishbone?
Snack time, Wishbone.
Oh, perfect timing.
To movies.
Shall we play a game?
To animation.
See, you moronic mutants! No more turtles!
Look again, Shredhead. 4, count 'em, 4 turtles.
And so much more.
I don't want to grow up, 'cause baby, if I did, I couldn't be a Toys R Us kid.
Welcome to episode 33.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at the world of voiceover, including movies, TV, animation, and more. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show, I am excited to be bringing you an interview with Colleen Foy. Colleen, thank you so much for joining me today.
And completely my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. You know, the very first thing we love to do when we have a brand new guest on the show, Colleen, is to get to know them. So tell me about little Colleen Foy, the young girl that grew into the beautiful woman she is today, and how did she become an actress?
Oh, the origin story. Well, as long as I can remember, I loved performing. And by performing, I mean I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where there's not a ton. So as a kid, I was just forcing my parents to sit on the couch and watch me sing and dance, just making up songs and forcing my younger sister to do dances with me. And I remember the public library was having a sale of some of their items, books, records, things that they were moving out because they got better editions, and my dad purchased the Annie, the movie musical soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
Record album. So when that hit our family, I was like, oh my gosh, I can have backing, and I knew all the songs, and I could make up all my dances. So everything from "It's a Hard Knock Life" to some of Miss Hannigan's songs, which are a little racy. I remember in the movie, she calls Daddy Warbucks my little billiard ball, because he's got that bald head. And my parents were like, what is she saying? Little billiard ball? But I had memorized it and just loved performing. Of course, with the hope of like, I want to do this. But there was nothing in my life, no person in my life, no stories of someone who had gone from Wisconsin to become a big actor, and by big I mean successful, like able to pay their bills with it. So it was kind of something that I kept inside of me and didn't sort of talk about too much as a profession until it came time to choose a major for college, and it was theater arts was the only thing I wanted to do. And because of that, I considered taking time before I went into college of maybe something else will hit me. Maybe lightning will strike in another way. Even my guidance counselor in high school, when I told her what I wanted to do, she was like, you should think about picking something else. And I thought, okay, she's the guidance counselor. I'm being guided. She probably knows better than me. But what she didn't know, and this sounds so cheesy, but what she didn't know was kind of the resilience that I had inside of me and the ability to withstand criticism or rejection. I think I heard from a lot of people when I wanted to move to one of the coasts and do this, they're going to eat you up. People from the Midwest, like it's a lot of rejection and it's blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, I think the rejection can help me figure out how to pivot so that next time I'm seen as a better choice for them. And also the word rejection is so, it's kind of a false word because in this business, because what they're actually saying is right now we're picking someone else that's a better fit for our project. It has nothing to do with me or my skill set. They're really looking for the right match at the right time. And luckily there have been moments where when I know that a job is looking at more established actors. I want to say bigger actors with more of they're more of a known entity in this world. But I was the better fit at the right time. So it's really a matter of like how they're going to collaborate and who they're inviting to that table to make the perfect collaboration. So I had an understanding that I could take it because I sort of had that view of what it was going to be. It wasn't going to be a rejection of me as a person. If I think if any actor ties their worth into this business, then that's a recipe for success. And I mean, I'm sorry, failure. A recipe for failure. Whoops. A recipe for failure. You'll never find your worth in this business. It has to come outside of it. So I studied theater arts. My first job after college, I was completely I was a complete performer. I made my living as an actor for my first year out of college, and then after that year of touring, I moved out to Los Angeles and have been doing it ever since. And I have had jobs, JOBS. I've had muggle jobs along the way, where I'm not being paid completely to perform, but I take it as a way of me showing up and saying I'm willing to do this work so that I can invest fully into my career, the thing that I came here to do. So I hope that wasn't too long-winded. And,
no.
Okay. Great.
No, and even when we work those muggle jobs, I have found that there are times we learn things from life, our experiences that eventually can correlate into our entertainment industries, because we learn life lessons that may not have been something we would have come across or a scenario we would have encountered. And then later we may be portraying something like that in a production, whether it be vocal or physical, live stage, film, anything. So sometimes the things we do in life that aren't always entertainment are still training for what can come down the line for us someday.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And training, I think, to be a human.
Yes.
I feel like every person should be a restaurant server at some point in their life, because you get to see sort of how what it's actually like. I think then other people would treat service industry workers a little better. I think you just learn how to human the more you sort of pop into these different pockets of different industries.
Absolutely. And I really loved what you said, Colleen, about the rejection of you during an interview or an audition, should we say. And, I hadn't thought of it exactly in the way that you mentioned it, but it's more of a rejection of maybe the portrayal of how you said the lines or the portrayal of how you look. And they've got that certain image on how that character should sound and look. And so it isn't a personal rejection of you, but it's that you don't fit the mold of what they're looking for at this particular time. But I've heard countless stories where people say, but you know what? I got a call back the next day, not for that role, but for another audition for another character in the same production. And I landed the role, so sometimes getting in front of people, whether it be that production or something else, that they're like, you know what? I really remember that Colleen Foy girl. She's not good for this film, but we're doing another one next summer. Let's keep her in the docket for that and ask her to come back. And then that's when you have an opportunity to come back and shine, because they've asked you to come, not the other way around.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a fantastic thing, I think, for any actor to remember the possibility of that happening.
Yeah. So always keep a positive attitude, because you just never know the kind of impact you may leave on people, whether or not they cast you initially. So
correct.
Just some good words of advice.
Absolutely. Yes. Print that. Put it on coffee mugs.
Absolutely.
Put it on bumper stickers.
I'll start an Etsy shop.
There you go.
So, Colleen, within the first year of moving to Los Angeles, you made your feature debut in director Paul Thomas Anderson's acclaimed drama, There Will Be Blood. What was it like to come to LA and land a role so quickly in that kind of a production?
Surreal. It was so surreal. Even now, I'm a little at a loss for words, because it just is a bit of a fairy tale. Now, I didn't even have an agent at that point.
Wow.
I had a commercial, excuse me, I had a commercial agent, which is a little easier to get in LA rather than a theatrical agent, which is TV and film. And I knew that they were looking for someone very similar to me, a hearing girl who knew sign language and was blonde. And I was blonde at the time. So I sent in my headshot and resume with a cover letter in actual like snail mail, which at the time we just called mail. And I knew the address to send it to was 5555 Melrose Avenue. And I was like, okay, well, here we go. And turns out, this was in my first year, of course, turns out that is Paramount Studios.
Wow.
So I thought I was just sending it to 5555 Melrose. Of course, it's Paramount Studios. I had a little bit of a gift of naivete in the beginning. If I knew, like, oh my gosh, I'm sending this to Paramount Studios, holy cannoli, it would have probably put an expectation in my mind. But I was like, oh, here we go. Great. I know sign language. I toured for a year with sign language. I'm fluent in it. They're going to love it. And then months went by. And I think in that time, in those months, they were looking at, of course, actors who had agents, whose managers were submitting them. They took a semester of sign language in college. They have a nephew who's deaf. You should look at them. People were being pitched and people were auditioning and people were not the right fit.
Yeah.
So a few months after that, I got a call from Cassandra Koulakundis, who is the casting director for Paul Thomas Anderson. And she said, do you have time to come down and meet with me? I said, yes. Yes, of course. What is your address? She said 5555 Melrose. I said, oh, okay. Familiar with that address. So I went down and when she turned on the camera, she said, can you tell us a little bit about how you know sign language? And I said, sure. Would you like me to speak it? Would you like me to sign it? Or would you like me to sign it and speak it at the same time? And the look on her face, she was like, can you sign and speak at the same time? And I was like, absolutely. So I started,
Wow.
and it's a difficult thing to do. It's called SIMCOM, simultaneous communication.
Wow.
When you're signing and speaking at the same time, because American Sign Language is so unique. The grammar, the sentence structure, it's its own thing. It's not direct English equivalent. So when I did that, I think I saw on her face that I was quote unquote the real deal as far as knowing sign language. And that made me a better fit for what they were doing than other actors. So when I eventually got hired for it, I was waitressing at the time and I kept missing her calls because I was waitressing. And so I'd be like, can you cover my tables? I'm going to go out to the alleyway and try and call her back. Finally, they flew me down to Texas, to El Paso, and I drove to Marfa. And I couldn't believe that it was happening. I actually cried on the drive to El Paso because I was like, I'm going to get there and they'll realize I'm just a theater actress from Wisconsin and they're going to fire me. And then I remember driving and the skies opened up and there was thunder and lightning and raining. And I was like, see? Even the weather gets it. This is bad. And when I got there, it was easy. It was
awesome.
so easy. They had set up they had created an entire town in the middle of a hillside in Marfa, Texas. And they had my clothing was of the period. I just had to show up and connect with the other actors in the scene and just communicate. It was so beautiful. They created an entire world and I just got dropped down into it. It made it so easy. And then of course I flew back to Los Angeles and kept waitressing. So, and it was a couple years before the movie came out and I kept telling people I'm in a movie called There Will Be Blood. And they were like, ooh, is that a slasher movie? Do you die right away? And I was like, it's not a slasher, okay?
Thanks, guys. That's how much you think of me.
Totally. It's Paul Thomas Anderson. I was like, I was in a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, and people were like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, cool. Cool little actress. I'm sure you did. Sure, yeah. Yeah. And then finally, when it came out, I was like, see? Yeah. So, gosh, yeah, I still can't believe my luck.
What an experience.
Yeah, really cool.
That's fantastic. Well, Colleen, thank you so much for diving into that and kind of sharing a little bit. It sounds magical and very Hollywood dreamy kind of, like somebody should write a book about it. It's just kind of
Absolutely.
very interesting start to your career. And I definitely think you should write a book about it, because it would be very fascinating to see your story. Just as things come along, you start writing it, and then one day you're just able to publish it, because then you've got a whole bunch of chapters to put out there.
Oh, I love that. I have several books that actors have written, and I go to them from time to time. And so maybe that's, maybe you've started something here.
Sometimes I find that when there's inspiration in your life, if you jot those things down, or at least start typing them up now, as things come, more will just add to it. And eventually you'll have that book, so that the things are fresh and they're vibrant in your mind. And then as new things come, the journey of that book just develops over time. And then one day you'll be able to publish it. It'd be pretty inspirational, I think.
I love that. Thank you for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, we are going to talk about a role where you actually did some voiceover in Ever After High, the series on Netflix, where you played Holly O'Hare, the daughter of Rapunzel. What was it like for you to get to be part of that animated series and to be on Netflix? I mean, one day back in the day, people would have been like, Netflix, meh, but it's grown a lot in the production quality and the things they've put out. So what was it like for you to be a part of that production, and especially with it being a Netflix one?
Well, I love the character of Holly O'Hare. I'm actually a big fan of the entire series. I know it's created for people who are much younger than me, but I actually love the idea of a school for the children of fairy tale characters. Now, my character was a little unique because I'm Rapunzel's daughter, Holly O'Hare, but I have a twin sister. Now, only one of us can be sort of heir to the Rapunzel throne, and it's the firstborn. And we we find out in the series that although it was always thought that Holly O'Hare was going to be the heir to the throne, that my sister was born first. So she had say, but she was like, you take it. I'm cool. I'm just going to be over here on the side. So their sister bond was just kind of gorgeous. And I got to record with Lindsay Ames, who played my twin sister. We got to record together quite often, which is so rare, because oftentimes you're just doing your lines with, of course, the producers, the writer, the director in the sound booth. So you're able to look at them, but you have no one to sort of bounce things off of. You're imagining in your mind how the other characters are talking. But to be able to be in the recording booth with her and have scenes back and forth was just fantastic. And she's so different from me. I actually took a picture because we kind of resemble our characters. Our characters a little bit. She's got darker hair. She's a little edgier. And I, when we were recording it, had blonde hair. And I always loved to dress a little bit in the vein of Holly O'Hare when I would go in to record. So what that meant was like a little bit of a lace blouse with a purple shirt on top of it, my hair curled, because I know you can show up to a sound booth in your jammies if you want to, it doesn't matter. But for me, I just loved putting a little bit of Holly on me. So I have a picture of the two of us recording together, and I juxtaposed it with a picture of our characters hugging. And it's so funny because we have the same essence of our characters.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool.
So awesome. Well, I love the productions that Netflix has put out, especially, Ever After High, where they dive into the kind of what ifs and the future of the characters like Rapunzel, where they dive more into the familiar stories of the families. Because, I think it's unique that they're telling, in essence, new fairy tales and creating something beyond what we know, because it gives the possibility of the future for those characters an endless opportunity. And I know you say the audience is a lot younger than you are, but it gives them it gives them an opportunity to say, hey, who played Holly O'Hare? And they look up your name, and as they grow up, they continue to follow you and watch your productions. And that's part of what Who Did That Voice is all about, just to teach people who the actors are and to help people latch onto and follow people's careers. So
yeah. Oh, I so appreciate that. I have sent some headshots to young fans who really love the show and love Holly, and it means a lot to me. It means a whole lot to me that they because Holly is, pure of heart, and of course has scenarios that feel like she wants to change them, but is a good person. So my gosh, that's a gift. That's such a gift.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about this sign language production that you were in.
Yeah.
You kind of talked about being proficient in sign language. So the production was called Quid Pro Quo, correct?
Yes.
And it was performed in American Sign Language, but it was voiced by offstage actors. I found that very fascinating and unique. Tell us a little bit about that production and how that all came to be.
Yeah, well, it is incredibly unique. So I'm glad that you picked up on how special it is, because typically when deaf audiences are watching theater, they will have to look from the action on stage to an interpreter who's sort of on the edge of the stage, back to the action on stage, then to an interpreter, and there's something lost. There's something lost in that. So my dear friend Garrett Zurcher, who is still a playwright in New York, he was a theater student with me at Marquette University, and he was the first deaf student at our university.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. He's broken a lot of barriers, and that hasn't been easy. I give him so much credit, in addition to all of his talent. But for his senior thesis, he wanted to write a play that would take care of that disconnect that deaf audiences had when they were watching what's on stage, and then watching an interpreter, watching what's on stage, watching an interpreter. So he wrote this to be performed completely in sign language. And then, of course, so that everyone can understand, there were two actors off stage who voiced it for us. So it's kind of like you are, it just fits so beautifully, because a deaf person and a hearing person could sit next to each other in the theater and understand the play, of course, in their own ways, but in the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's access is a beautiful thing. Access for all. So I learned my lines for that because I didn't know sign language at the time. I was learning my lines, memorizing my lines, and then the play was so well received at our university that the head of the theater program submitted it to the American College Theater Festival, and we competed at different levels, local, regional, and then we ended up winning and went to the Kennedy Center in DC. So for that entire year of competing with the play, I was able to build my vocabulary and also, most importantly, I think, build my confidence with sign language. There are times when I sign something and I'm like, my hands just moved that way. I have no idea if any of those were right words. And so sort of learning how to not second guess myself. But by the time we went to DC, I felt so strong in my abilities, and that allowed me then to audition for the National Theater of the Deaf my first year out of college, and was able to work in another production that was completely performed in sign language and voiced by the only hearing actor, which was me. So I was doing voices for all the characters while on stage, but also was an actor myself, signing and speaking. So sign language has been a huge part of my life, but also my professional life. And it's really afforded me some incredible opportunities. And I found learning American Sign Language to be much easier than I thought. And so many people tell me, I want to know, can you teach me a little bit? And there's classes all over the place. They should be taught by deaf instructors because that's their native language.
Yeah.
But it's so much easier than I initially thought. I wish I had learned it much earlier, even though I've been I've been using it for over 2 decades. So
that's amazing. What a great story, and the perspective of how the actors themselves were actually signing it on stage and then having a voiceover. It's almost like watching an animation live or something like that, with having the voices coming off stage onto the characters. And I think more productions should be done that way. I think one of my first things with sign language was growing up. My mom used to teach me like some of the alphabet. I don't really know a lot, but she would kind of teach me and kind of brought it to my attention. And then one of my favorite movies is Mr. Holland's Opus, where of course his son is deaf.
Yes.
And it was like, how do I make my son be able to experience the music with his friends who are deaf? And I was like, it just makes you think in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if I can't hear, how do I understand or perceive this music? And so with y'all doing a production like that and Mr. Holland doing it with lights, it's just, there are different ways that we can speak to those who are deaf, or who have other disabilities or, handy capabilities. But it's just amazing the new things that are coming out, like this production y'all did of Quid Pro Quo. And I think more productions should be done like that on Broadway and other places so that people can hear and see the production in their own languages. I love it.
1,000,000%. We actually did one performance when I was with the National Theater of the Deaf. We did one performance in Illinois where they actually had it described for the blind as well.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes. So I was so in awe of the gentleman who did that. He really worked with us to understand what was going on, watched our rehearsal so he could describe it. So you could have a hearing person, a deaf person, and a blind person sitting next to each other, all experiencing it the same. And I think the less that we like separate it, this performance will be signed for the hearing impaired. This performance will have visual description for the blind. All together, let's come all together so that we can share in it the same way. Less separation and more sort of community created theater so that everyone can experience it. Theater, but also TV and movies and
yes. Well, we're going to talk about the feature film you have coming out. I don't know how much you can talk about it with NDAs and such, but Netflix has a movie coming out called Blonde. It's coming out in 2022, and it was produced by Brad Pitt's Plan B Entertainment. Can you tell us much about that or some about your character or kind of what we can expect with that production coming out this next year?
Sure, absolutely. So Blonde is this film written and directed by Andrew Dominic. He adapted it from I want to say a novel about Marilyn Monroe. So it is based on fact and based on true stories, and then of course dramatized, right?
Yes.
Because we don't know all the moments that happened behind closed doors, behind the scenes. So this has been sort of his passion project for years, and different actors have been attached to it throughout the years. But Ana de Armas, a Cuban Spanish actress, is playing the role of Marilyn. If I only bring that up, well, she's fantastic. She is so fantastic. She is currently in the James Bond movie. She stole the show in Knives Out, but she's going to skyrocket even bigger because of this movie. So she's fantastic. But the second reason why I bring it up is because she speaks with an accent. And she did 9 months of dialect training to play Marilyn Monroe, to be able to sound like her.
Wow.
Yes. And there was a dialect coach on set who after a take would come up and let her know, great, that's exactly great. That's what we need. Or when you say who in Marilyn's voice, it has to have a little more to it. So that was fascinating to watch. That being said, it was another period piece similar to There Will Be Blood. So we shot in this no longer used, I want to say abandoned home for intellectually disabled adults in a place called Diamond Bar, Los Angeles, which is quite far away. When I say Diamond Bar, people are like, huh? And I say, yes, yep. So you kind of just like keep going on the freeway. And so it's like frozen in time, this place.
Crazy.
Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. It reminded me a little bit of pictures of like Chernobyl now,
What?
where yes, less intense, but they had a playground, and it's like all sorts of trees grown up around it and fences around it, and but inside the facility it's like preserved, like a time capsule.
Wow.
And they had these incredible wardrobe pieces for us. I play a nurse, a psychiatric nurse, and so we had these corsets holy cannoli, these corsets and these like stockings that like clip into the corsets, and the nurses' outfits were like cinched at the waist, and a hat that would almost sort of fall off your head. So just having those elements, being in this location and with that wardrobe, it feels like some of the work was already done for us. I felt that way with There Will Be Blood, when they sort of plop us into this beautifully created world that does some of the acting for you.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic. The person I was most excited to work with was Julianne Nicholson, a fantastic actress, and I've been a fan of hers for years, of her work. And on the very last day when I was wrapped, they were done shooting with Colleen Foy. I found her in the makeup trailer. I knew she was in the makeup trailer, so I went, knocked on their door, and I said, "I'm so sorry to bother you, Julianne, but I've been a fan of yours for so long. Your work has always inspired me. And to see you and work with you and know what a good person you are, I've become even more of a fan. Thank you so much." And she was like, oh my goodness, thank you. And I was like, absolutely. Closed the door, and then I was like, oh, did I just do that? Okay, I did that. Totally did that. It's cool. I didn't like burst into flames. I didn't melt. Woo! I just told this woman who I adore how much she means to me. It was great.
That is fantastic. I'm glad you got an opportunity to at least tell her that, since she had been such an inspiration to you through your life.
Yes. Me too.
Well, you know, when you were talking about the production and when I read a little bit about it, Blonde kind of gave me this feeling of Nurse Ratched, just kind of the facility and just kind of the outfits and stuff. So.
Oh, I love that. I love that correlation. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Marilyn's absolutely the star, but the scenes that we shot were very much sort of the same time.
And one thing I love is timepieces. I love time period pieces. I do feel that the sets and those kind of environments, whether they be natural or made, I feel that they do bring a character of their own to the sets, and they help you kind of transform your mentality and your thinking and your feeling of how you carry yourself and speak and just everything, you know. And it's always been something I've been fascinated with. Personally, I always felt like I should have been born in the 20s and lived in the 40s, you know, kind of an old school guy, you know, old school gentleman type. But, you know, I don't know, you know, it's like time period pieces have always really spoken to me. So I'm looking very much forward to seeing Blonde when it comes out and to getting to partake in that amazing production. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I relate to that, feeling born in the wrong decade. Sort of like, my natural disposition feels sort of old-fashioned.
Yeah.
You can say a little old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Maybe I came a few decades too late. Yeah, I understand that.
That's funny, you know, and I've always kind of said like I'm an old fashioned guy in a modern time kind of a thing, you know?
Yes,
so.
Absolutely.
So I've got two final questions for you, Colleen, and we will wrap this interview up. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right. The first of the two is, what advice would you give to an up and coming actor or actress who is inspired to act and they find that despite what their guidance counselor said, it's what they want to do? What would you tell that young boy or girl who is dreaming of becoming an actor?
Well, I would tell them to do as much research as possible, to really sort of, because I think as artists, people assume we're so dreamy, head in the clouds, you're always doing this and being this character, blah, blah, blah. I would come up with some facts, counterbalance that dream with information. I interviewed as many people as I could who I knew from the Midwest who lived in California, in Los Angeles. I asked them what their budget was for food, for gas, how much their rent was, how they got an agent, what they talked about in their agency meetings. I counterbalanced my dreaminess and my desire and my passion with a lot of facts, so that I wasn't approaching this with just sort of a head in the clouds mentality. So I would encourage them to find people who have successfully done what they want to do and ask them for advice and information, get a mentor. And then with all those things that the mentor says, take everything with a grain of salt. I always say, eat the fish and spit out the bones. So if it's doesn't make sense, if it doesn't make sense or doesn't work with your ethics or even sort of your own disposition, don't do it. But get a lot of research, read as much as you can, talk to people who believe in the validity of your dream and can help you figure out how to make that dream possible. Yeah, my advice. And always, I am one of those people. So if people want to hit me up on Instagram, they can message me there, or Twitter. I'll be happy to provide some insight that way. I would love to be the person that I needed when I was a kiddo.
Fantastic, Colleen. I really appreciate your advice. I think that is some of the most sound advice I've ever heard from somebody talking about going to LA, because there is a financial aspect that people just don't always consider. And they think about the dreaminess, and I want to be an actor and I want to be an actress. And I had a buddy that did that, and he went there and lived in his car for a while, and struggled to make it. So there is an aspect of, if you don't think about the practical reality of rent and those kind of things, like you were talking about, you could be in a world of not so much awesomeness if you're not planning ahead. So I appreciate that, Colleen, and that you're willing to share that with other people to kind of say, hey, consider these things in your meetings, and consider this kind of a budget, and, how to make it in life if you're not always acting day to day, for your income. So that's fantastic advice. I really love it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Colleen, the final question I have for you today is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Wow, that's a good one. I would love to leave behind a legacy of. I had a feeling you were going to ask this. And so I have some thoughts, but I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by emotion in this moment, because that really does take it to sort of a bird's eye view. So often I think of like my to-do list, and I have to send this, and then I have this event, and then I have to do this and this and this and this. And when I take it to that bird's eye view, I get a little emotional thinking about it. So I'm glad that you asked it. I want to leave behind a legacy of community and empowerment. I'm an acting teacher. I've been teaching in LA for 11 and a half years. And I have been able to then work in the business with a lot of these people. And it's happened only because they are empowered and feel confident and want to help each other out. So when I look back at my IMDb page, when I'm, let's say 80 and on set, by the way, 80 and on set, when I look back at my IMDb page, I want to see that all those jobs, or many of those jobs, came about because people knew me and knew that I would bring kindness to set, knew that I would support them, and knew that I wanted to collaborate with them. I'm so available to audition for people I've never met before, but I want community of like-minded individuals who aren't just creating great art, but are doing it with kindness, and a sense of wanting to share in each other's talents and skill sets. I hope the legacy I leave behind is that others who have then worked with me want to do that for other people, and that we leave this business a little bit kinder than we found it.
I love that. I think that's a great legacy that you want to leave behind. And I think it's absolutely positively possible for you to be acting at 80 or 90 years old, because Dick Van Dyke, Angela Lansbury, so many of these people are still doing things to this day, and they're in their early to mid 90s, doing Mary Poppins 2, and so many other things where they were both in that movie, actually, both Angela and Dick Van Dyke. So it's amazing, and it's totally possible that you could still be acting and teaching into your 90s or 100s. Thank
you so much. You just gave me goosebumps. So, to be in the same sentence with Angela Lansbury. Oh my goodness.
Well, you've got to use something as an inspiration and say, is it possible? Could I still be acting at 80 or 90 years old?
Yes.
Absolutely. Dick Van Dyke and Angela Lansbury are still doing it. And Julie Andrews is about 10 years younger than them, but they're all still performing in things. And so the possibility for you to be acting and singing long into the future is absolutely possible.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, it has been an absolute honor having you on the show today, Colleen. Would you please give us a special closeout as we end today's episode? Maybe as Holly O'Hare.
Oh, thank you you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to it. And remember, whatever you set your mind to, you can do. I believe in you. Love, Holly O'Hare. This is Colleen Foy, and you've been listening to Who Did That Voice?
Hey everyone, and thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Who Did That Voice? If you enjoyed today's episode, please check us out online on all social media platforms at Who Did That Voice and on YouTube at Who Did That Voice 24. Also, remember to check out our website, whodidthatvoice.org. Again, that's www.whodidthatvoice.org. Thank you to all my listeners out there. I just wanted to say, if you want to partner with Who Did That Voice, just telling your friends and family about us is the best way to share the show with others, and or leaving us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast from. The third and final way is by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/Who Did That Voice.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.